How you doing tonight?
I'm going to have a hard time getting composed after that.
Was that the first time you've seen the video?
That's the first time I've seen the video.
Well, Dr. Lapchick, I've seen how much of an impact you've made to not just UCF, but everywhere. You've been everywhere. But we want to know, of all the universities and all the towns of the world, what brought you to UCF?
Well, first of all, the woman who just spoke wanted to be back in Florida where her mom lived in Castleberry, and I promised her we'd get here. So I was able to convince Northeastern University, where I was working at the time, that I could do what I was doing for them here. And we started that way, and then President Hitt approached me about starting a sports business management graduate program because they had gotten a $2.5 million gift from Rich and Helen DeVos, and that was matched by the state. So I was able to do some research for them. I wasn't thinking about myself, and I realized that there are 67 graduate programs in the country, not one emphasized diversity or service. They were only 6% students of color, 20% women, and I knew the industry was looking for more women and people of color. So I asked John if that could be the basis of the program, and he said yes, and then we'd like you to be the head of the program, and that's how I ended up at UCF. It's the best place I've ever been. It's the best job I've ever had. I work with the best people that I've ever worked with, and the students are amazing.
Aww. One of the things I love about UCF, I actually use the acronym Under Construction Forever, because it really is. It's constantly growing, constantly changing, but you've been here 21 years, so you've been able to see everything and just all the changes as well. Can you tell us, what are you most proud of in your past 21 years here, and what will you miss the most?
I'm most proud of the fact that we were the first program in the country to emphasize diversity and inclusion. Now, after the racial reckoning, almost everybody does, but we were literally the first ones. I'm incredibly proud of the fact that our students and our faculty have spent 58 weeks in the lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans since Hurricane Katrina, rebuilding homes. We worked on 158 homes during that time, and it's been a great bonding experience for the students. By the time they get into their first class, it's not a formal introduction. They had worked shoulder to shoulder, perspired together in that August heat, and became one.
Love that, love that. Now, Rich, I actually had the pleasure of meeting you about 2 years ago, when I interviewed you for a webinar, and I had heard your incredible story. But people who might not know you might ask, why is this 76-year-old white man fighting racism and sexism? So can you tell us how you got involved and why?
Well, believe it or not, when I was 5 years old, I looked outside my bedroom window in Yonkers, New York, where I was raised, and I saw my father's image swinging from a tree with people under the tree picketing. And for several years after that, I would pick up the extension phone in the house, my dad not knowing I was listening, and it was racial epithet after racial epithet being hurled at him. I didn't know what it was all about, why so many people hated my best friend. I would later find out that as the coach of the New York Knicks in 1950, he signed the first black player in the history of the NBA, a league that's now 80% black. So that had a lot to do with it. He was a double inductee into the Basketball Hall of Fame. Everybody told me I was going to follow in his footsteps. I liked that idea. I was 6 feet tall in the 8th grade. I'm actually 5'10", 60 years later. Go figure that out. But I was pretty heavily recruited, and I chose not to go to the top basketball program in the country at Power Memorial, but became friends with the coach. The coach asked me to come to his summer camp the next year. He had 5 of his white players there and 1 of his black players, and one of the white players was dropping the N-word on the black guy from dawn till dusk until I finally challenged him on the 3rd day. He literally knocked me out cold. The name of the black guy was then Lou Alcindor, became Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and a lifelong friendship began. We've literally just come back, my wife and I, from Los Angeles to celebrate Kareem's 75th birthday party, so it's been that rich friendship. But as a 15-year-old white kid, I suddenly had a young, urban African-American lens to see what racism was doing to his community and other communities of color, and decided I was going to spend the rest of my life working in the area of civil rights, and that's actually what happened.
Amazing. Now, I like that you had mentioned your friends, and you've actually been friends with some amazing people like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, Arthur Ashe, and even Nelson Mandela. So can you tell us who's had the biggest impact on you and your success?
3 people had the biggest impact on me: my dad, my sister Barbara, who in 1961 moved to Africa, and I started reading about Africa and fell in love with the continent, and the woman who just talked in the video, my wife Ann, has had a tremendous impact on me in staying the course on social justice issues because she has such a big social justice conscience herself.
Aww. So, Rich, you made such a significant impact. You just got the Legendary Award, which is a huge feat, by the way. I'm sure everybody's wondering this question: what's next for you?
Well, the Orlando Sentinel wrote it that I was retiring, but I'm actually stepping down as the chair of the department to focus 100% of my time on anti-racist activities. Part of that will be with the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports, which is part of the DOS program in the College of Business. And the rest of the time, I'm going to try and speak in front of audiences that I don't have access to try and influence their opinion on issues of race. And a kind of charming thing that's happened in the past couple of weeks is some filmmakers have approached me to make a book that I wrote on Eddie Robinson's life, the great coach at Grambling State, into a 7-part mini-series, so I'm going to be involved with the production of that as well.
All right, now I have a personal question for you because I just see how much knowledge and experience you've had over the years. But from a student, what advice would you give, or what's some important advice you would tell your graduates?
Well, what I tell my graduates is, after a year and a half of being in the program and as they're about to go out in the world, I say the best thing that you can do is find your Ann, because that, for me, has been what sustained me, this relationship that I have with my wife, Ann Pasnak, and the deep love, and try to emphasize to our students that if you're not in good shape with your family and don't have a tight family together, it doesn't matter what else you're going to do, you'll never be happy. So I wish them all to find their Ann.
All right, Rich, last question I have for you tonight, but you deal with so many difficult issues like racial inequality, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and other forms of discrimination. How do you remain optimistic?
Well, sometimes it's not easy, Jalen, but I always go back to May 10th of 1994. And on that day, I was the guest of Nelson Mandela at his inauguration. And as I stood there watching him be sworn in, I realized that if this man, who had been probably the most hated person in his country by the white power structure, had spent 27 years as a political prisoner, could somehow become its president, that anything and everything is possible. So all the issues that you talked about, we can overcome.
Thank you so much, Rich. Keep being legendary. Thank you for joining us tonight. One more time for Richard.